Give us a brief overview of your background.
I did my undergrad and I got a master's at MIT in computer science. And then after that, I was briefly a strategy consultant. And then right before I started business school, I was working in private equity on the operating side.
Why did you pursue an MBA?
I had a very technical background in undergrad, and I was working on a lot of technical projects in my career, and I wanted to explore the business side. I've always been interested in entrepreneurship, and I think I wanted to gain a set of skills and build a network, learn about leadership. All these elements to, I think, what makes a successful company were complementary to my current skill sets.
What type of projects are you most experienced with?
Both at Oliver Wyman and at Blackstone, I was focused primarily on digital projects, specifically around thinking about advanced analytics, AI, machine learning.
How did you decide which business school to attend?
I decided to attend the Stanford GSB. I'm currently a first-year student there. There was a lot of intangibles to Stanford that I thought were very appealing. I think one of the things that I felt right away was the strong emphasis on community, and that was really important to me, forming meaningful relationships with people and getting to learn from my peers just as much as I learned from professors in the institution. And then I think beyond that, I think for what I'm interested in, AI, machine learning, I think there's really no better place on earth than being in and around Stanford for pursuing entrepreneurship in those spaces.
Which other schools did you apply to, and what was your decision-making process like?
So I had also applied to HBS and Wharton. And I think my decision-making process really just centered around wanting to, get a sort of new educational experience. So having gone to MIT, Boston was a very familiar place to me. And I think Stanford just had that focus on community and the emphasis on entrepreneurship. And I think, when it came down to thinking about those factors, it was an easy choice.
Which schools were you accepted at?
I was, in the end, deciding between Stanford and Wharton, and ended up choosing Stanford.
What were the most challenging parts of the admissions process, and why did you feel that you needed an admissions consultant?
So there were a few things. I think one was, as you mentioned, when you work very demanding jobs. So when I was in consulting and then when I was in PE, it's very difficult to be efficient with whatever hours you have remaining to balance something like applying to grad school on the side. And so I think one of the big appealing things about working with a consultant was just making the best use of my limited time, and just gaining that efficiency. And then I think the second critical piece really was, I think, applying to business schools in particular. The process is fairly abstract. The questions that get asked are very broad and open-ended. And I think it was very helpful for me to bounce ideas off of and get mentorship and sort of guidance from people who were very experienced with the process and have seen, candidates like myself under constraints that I would bring in terms of having worked long hours. And I think, just having a consultant made a lot of sense in that regard.
Why did you decide to work with Inspira in particular?
I'm someone who goes off of gut feel for a lot of important decisions, for better or worse. And I think after I had an initial call with some of the folks at Inspira, I got the sense that they were very personally invested in me versus just having me and my success be another bullet point on the Inspira resume. So that was very important to me, because I felt like part of this was not just applying to business schools, but I thought some of the questions that I was forced to answer were very personal. And I wouldn't want to go through that exploration and journey with a thought partner who I didn't feel was equally invested in me learning about myself in that way. So I think that personal touch was very important. And then it was also just very clear to me that the folks at Inspira are just very knowledgeable about the process. We're able to answer kind of complex questions that I had right off the bat with very, very nuanced and thoughtful answers that really helped guide my process along. So I think, right off the bat, I had a very good feeling about it, and I'm fortunate that I did.
What advice do you have for people considering working with Inspira?
I think the biggest piece of advice I can give is there's nobody who's going to do the work for you. You, at the end of the day, have to come up with your own ideas, put together your own essays and understanding of how you want to actually portray yourself. Inspira is very much a thoughtful thought partner. And I think my advice would be don't forego the opportunity to really push on thinking about some of this stuff yourself. And then I would say the other thing I would suggest is have ideas about you be challenged. I think one of the most fruitful elements of the experience, beyond just, putting together the application and having a degree of success with the outcomes was when I was asked to confront hard questions about myself and my motivations. I think having someone like the folks at Inspira be very direct about challenging me and asking me to, dig deeper, think deeper, and sort of call me out when some of my ideas and thoughts didn't really make a whole lot of sense. I think that was awesome. So I think the other piece of advice I would have is just be open and willing to that type of interaction, because it's what I experienced, and I think it was a very beneficial thing to have during the process.
What was your experience like working with Inspira?
The turnaround time was super fast. In my mind, I had thought I'll work on an essay, and if I want to get feedback on the ideas or the quality of writing, it'll take a few days at a time because folks are busy. But the turnaround time was lightning fast. If I sent something in the morning, I had really detailed feedback by the evening. So really, the ball was in my court, which was fantastic because given what I had mentioned earlier about my hours and the difficulty of my scheduling, to have the ball be in my court as much as possible was just really important. And I think, working with folks at Inspira, just so friendly, it's just such a collegial thing. I always felt like I could pick up the phone and give the folks a call and ask questions, big or small. And, when you're in the trenches really working on difficult problems, Inspira will be there with you.
What are some aspects of Inspira's support that were most valuable to you?
There were a few things. I think, for one, I felt like my background was relatively overrepresented in business schools, thinking about, coming from consulting and or finance. And so it was of particular importance for me during the process to differentiate myself as a candidate and let my, unique qualities and experiences come across in the application. So I think that was one thing that Inspira really helped me figure out, how to think about as well as how to represent. And then I think there were elements about my candidacy that I was unsure of heading into the application process. And I think, one example of that is, I'd really thrown myself into work when I graduated college. And I think that led to me having a sort of less extracurricular experiences than I thought the average business school applicant might. And I thought that would be reasonable negative. But Inspira helped me frame that appropriately. And I think, part of what they helped me do was figure out, like, okay, you have strengths and you have weaknesses, and rather than focusing on, heavily shoring up weaknesses or thinking too much about them, why don't we show people that your strengths, are really valuable, and like doubling down on that. So I think that reframing of my candidacy was really helpful as well. And I think generally speaking, there was just a ton of support that was individual to my specific candidacy, and that I think really helped push my application to the edge.
How many years of experience did you have prior to applying to business school?
So at the time that I applied to business school, I had a little over 2 years of experience.
What advice do you have for MBA applicants?
I think maybe the big piece of advice for an applicant is be prepared to be more introspective than maybe you've ever had to be for anything else. Because what schools look for is an understanding of what value you seek to impart on the world. And to answer that question, you have to really, really dig deep into your passions, your motivation. And I think being prepared to do that and being willing to do that is really important. And to something I was mentioning earlier, I think, everyone has weaknesses, and it's important just not to fixate on them. I think, people value your strengths. And I think, highlighting those, showing awareness of your weaknesses, but not fixating on them is another really important thing. And yeah, I think generally speaking, it's a fun process. It's, it's funny for me to say that now because there were definitely a lot of long nights, but I think at the end of it, I was very happy that I went through it just for the opportunity to really think deeply about my future.
How translatable are essays across business schools?
Mileage may vary depending on who you are, but my personal experience is that the essays are very, very different. And the reason for that is each one asks, similar types of questions that call upon similar experiences in the answer, but answering the question very, very directly and making sure that what you're explaining is answering the specific questions being asked is of utmost importance. So while there's some overlap in terms of content and experiences that you might highlight, I think approaching each essay as its own individual entity, distinct from any other applications or essays, is really important.
What are you most looking forward to?
I think the thing I'm most looking forward to is just continuing to grow relationships with people in my class. There's, again, a tremendous community aspect to the GSB that, coming into it, I'd heard about it, and I think it was something that was appealing to me coming in. You really don't even know what it is until you're part of it and immersed in it. And I'm just looking forward to continuing down that journey of really getting to know my classmates. And then I think there's a few other things. I think one of the appealing elements about business school for me was the global nature of it. So there's a high proportion of international students in every class at the GSB. And I think there's a large emphasis, in non-COVID times to do a lot of work internationally and gain that global exposure. In undergrad, I didn't have the opportunity to do any sort of study abroad or do any work internationally. So that to me was something that I'm really looking forward to. And then I think just the opportunity to take a variety of interesting classes with top-notch professors and grow as a leader and thinker.
What is your long-term career vision?
Where I see myself in 15 years is as an entrepreneur, somewhere along the entrepreneurial journey, whether I'll have, been working on one company that whole time or have at that point, pivoted to various other companies. I see myself as an entrepreneur. And I think, my time at Stanford is really going to help me along that journey.